Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Leeson here, today's top stories. We talked to a care group leader about government plans to make COVID vaccines mandatory for care home workers. US President Joe Biden meets Russian President Vladimir Putin as relations between the two powers are at their lowest in years. And the leader of Belarusian opposition urges the UK to impose more sanctions on President Lukashenko's regime. Reports suggest the government will make it law that care home workers must be vaccinated against COVID-19. NTD's Neil Woodrow talked to the leader of an independent care group about what this means for people on the front line.
Ministers are reportedly preparing to announce that COVID-19 vaccines will be mandatory for care home workers. Under the plan, staff will be given 16 weeks to get vaccinated or face losing their jobs. The government has held a consultation into the controversial proposal as reported by The Guardian. Multiple care groups and unions are raising concerns about mandatory vaccination. Chairman of the independent care group, Mike Padgham, represents care homes in Yorkshire. He said the proposed move could pose problems for small to medium care providers.
If you're a small and medium provider, it may not be possible to redeploy you away from the front line because most of the staff are in the front line. So if you can, you would, but what do you do with staff if you can't? And I don't think it's fair on them that they might have to lose their job.
He questioned the impact on staff too.
And it's a bit rich, I think, for social care staff who've been working hard during the pandemic to even have the threat of losing their job over them. It's not going to help our industry or encourage new people to come on one iota.
Padgham said some social care staff oppose getting vaccinated for cultural and religious reasons, or simply because the long shifts that staff work make getting the jab not convenient.
We need these workers in the sector. If we force them, I believe they'll be thinking, I can't stay here and I'll have to leave, and it makes them uncertain when we really do need those caring people.
Critics of the proposal have raised ethical queries. The Equality and Human Rights Commission concluded it's reasonable to legally require care home staff to be vaccinated, but it advised that exemptions should be included for staff who cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons. Cabinet Minister Liz Truss talked to Sky News on the matter.
We've got a hugely vulnerable population in our care homes, and making sure that staff are vaccinated is a priority, and everybody who has the opportunity for a vaccine should take up that opportunity.
A spokeswoman for the Department of Health and Social Care said that the department's response to the consultation will be published in due course. Considerations are ongoing over whether to extend the measure to NHS staff. Vaccines have always had their doubters, but with 75% of UK adults already with their first jab, it seems the nation is behind this one. But it remains to be seen how the nation feels about making jabs mandatory. Neil Woodrow, NTD News.
The leaders of the United States and Russia met face-to-face today in Geneva. It comes at a time when relations between the two powers are at their lowest in years. NTD's Lily Zhou tells us more.
US President Joe Biden and Russia's Vladimir Putin met on Wednesday for a highly anticipated summit in Geneva. It's their first meeting since Biden took office.
As I said outside, I think it's always better to meet face-to-face.
Both leaders agree that relations between their countries are at an all-time low.
There are many issues which have been accumulated in Russia-US relations which require being discussed at the highest level. I hope our meeting will be productive.
They say they hope the summit can lead to a stable and predictable relation between the two powers. In Brussels, ahead of the sit-down, Biden laid out his approach to the Russian leader.
We should decide where it's in our mutual interest, in the interest of the world, to cooperate and see if we can do that. And the areas where we don't agree, make it clear what the red lines are.
In an interview with NBC News, Putin held out the possibility the two nations could find areas of agreement.
А все-таки есть вопросы, которые требуют сверки часов, определения каких-то...
There are still matters that need a certain amount of note comparing and identification and determination of mutual positions so that the issues of mutual interest can be solved more effectively to the benefit of both the United States and Russia.
Соединенных Штатов, так и России.
The US blames Russia for election interference and cyber attacks on American businesses and accuses the Kremlin of military intervention in Ukraine. Biden has criticized Putin for allegedly poisoning and then jailing the Russian dissident Alexei Navalny. Putin shrugs off these accusations.
Ну, хорошо знаем, нас в чем-то только не обвиняли в вмешательстве в выборы.
We know it all well. We have been accused of all kinds of things, election interference, cyber attacks, and so on. And not even once did they bother to produce any kind of evidence, just baseless accusations.
Просто голословное обвинение.
The two men met a decade ago when Biden was vice president and Putin was prime minister. Both men belie a begrudging respect for one another. Putin compared Biden with his predecessor.
Президент Байден, конечно, кардинальным образом отличается от Трампа.
President Biden, of course, is radically different from Trump because he is a professional. He has spent virtually his entire adulthood in politics. He has been doing it for years.
And Biden offered this about his Russian counterpart.
He's bright, he's tough, and I have found that he is as they say, when he used to play ball, a worthy adversary.
Their meeting took place 35 years after the first meeting between US President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in Geneva. Lily Zhou, NTD News.
Former Metropolitan Police Commissioner says accusations that the force is institutionally corrupt are just not true. They were made by an independent panel for concealing failings over the murder of private investigator Daniel Morgan. Neil Woodrow brings us the latest from Scotland Yard, the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police. Neil, just how serious is this for the Met?
Thanks, Stuart. As you said, yesterday the report was released, and to be honest, the panel's conclusion was damning for the Met. An independent panel led by Baroness Nuala O'Lone found the force had put protecting its own reputation above finding Daniel Morgan's killer. They also personally criticised Scotland Yard boss Dame Cressida Dick, but former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Lord Ian Blair disputes the accusations that the force is institutionally corrupt. He told BBC Radio 4 on Wednesday that Dame Cressida is the finest officer of her generation. In 1987, the private investigator was found brutally murdered in a South London car park. Despite 5 police inquiries over 2 decades, no one has been convicted. Dame Cressida issued a written statement apologising again to Morgan's family. Despite the calls for a job, it seems Dame Cressida may just weather the storm on this one. Back to you, Stuart.
Leader of the Belarusian opposition calls for the UK to impose harsher sanctions amid ongoing concerns about human rights. NTD's Joy Dugid has the details.
The leader of the Belarusian opposition, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, urges the UK to use its power to strengthen sanctions placed on the president and his regime. Telling the Foreign Affairs Committee about the human rights situation in Belarus, she says there are no longer mass demonstrations because people fear violence and torture.
And since August, more than 35,000 people have been detained in Belarus, and at the moment there is 481 political prisoners, and this number is growing every day.
Lukashenko's regime has been placed under renewed scrutiny since May this year, when a Ryanair flight was grounded to arrest a journalist and his girlfriend.
Since December, there were no sanctions on the regime. There were no conferences or round tables or discussions about Belarus, and that's why Lukashenko felt this impunity and crossed this red line.
Tikhanovskaya calls for more sanctions on Belarusian individuals, judges and prosecutors, as well as on businesses and oligarchs who financially support the regime. An EU diplomat says EU ambassadors agreed additional sanctions, including asset freezes and travel bans, to be imposed on more than 70 Belarus individuals from Monday. Joy Dugid, NTD News.
Several major companies, including IKEA, have withdrawn advertising from GB News just days after the channel's long-awaited launch. NTD's Lily Joel brings us the latest.
Current Affairs TV channel GB News launched on Sunday. Chairman and former BBC presenter Andrew Neil says his channel will enable viewers to hear voices not reflected in the mainstream media. He says the channel will expose cancel culture and defend free speech. But days after the launch, several big brands including IKEA, Octopus Energy and cider firm Kopparberg say they're pulling their adverts. IKEA says GB News is not in line with the Swedish company's humanistic values. Broadcaster Piers Morgan says IKEA's decision was virtue signaling and he will be boycotting the company. Lily Zhou, NTD News.
Killer whales' social lives are revealed with the help of drone footage, and they seem to have complex relationship structures. NTD's Joy Duguid has the story.
A study that uses drones to film killer whales suggests that they have complex social structures that include close friendships. The study, led by the University of Exeter and the Centre for Whale Research, was based on 10 hours of drone footage. It finds killer whales spend more time interacting with certain individuals in their pod and tend to favour those of the same sex and similar age. Researchers say younger whales and females play a central social role in the group. The study finds as whales get older, they grow apart and become less central to the group. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
A poll released today shows independent financial advisors in Britain are strongly against investing in cryptocurrencies. Digital currencies have soared in popularity during the pandemic as stay-at-home rules and high savings rates triggered a surge in investing by non-professionals. In a poll by Opinium, 93% of those polled would never recommend cryptocurrencies, and almost the same number said they would be concerned over a client investing in them. Bitcoin, the biggest cryptocurrency, has slumped 40% since hitting an all-time high in April. The poll was based on the responses from 200 independent financial advisors. Still to come, Coke or water? A simple action by football megastar Cristiano Ronaldo sees billions of pounds wiped from Coca-Cola's share value. That and more when we return.